Chapter 58, A Dragon's Fire. Casterly Rock, 294 AC. Jon watched as Rhaenix teased him relentlessly while he picked out his clothes. Her playful banter was non-stop, and although it was amusing, he was on the verge of losing his patience when she settled on his shirt. He glanced at her, and the dragon-like grin on her face made him pause. Suddenly, she coughed and cocked her head. "Ray, are you ill?" I feel something," Rhaenix replied, coughing again. "I'll get someone." "Ray?" he said, confusion creeping into his voice. "No, Jay, I need you. I think I'm ready." "Ready?" "For fire, Jay." "I think I'm ready to breathe fire," she said, and he stared at her in awe. It felt too soon. Tyrion had advised him that she should wait a couple more moons. "Dracarys," he said, but he had to react quickly as his shirt suddenly ignited in flames. He grabbed the jug of water he kept on his table and doused the burning fabric, watching in dismay as there was nothing left of it. The chair he had placed it on was nearly singed away. He hurried over to her and lifted her into his arms, feeling her tremble slightly. The worry etched on her face made him wonder why she felt that way. "Ray?" "I'm sorry, Jay. I couldn't control it," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "You will, though. Ray, this is amazing. You shouldn't be able to do this yet, especially not with a flame that big. We'll practice, and you can even cook your own food now," he said, his excitement evident. Thankfully, she began to relax. "I never liked that shirt anyway." "You should wear your red one," she suggested, her tone a mix of seriousness and jest. "As my sister commands," he replied with a mock bow. "You, brother, are an idiot," she said, flitting to her chest. In the end, Jon took her advice and donned the red shirt. As he gazed into the looking glass, he realized he could pass for someone of importance. Dropped his head in a playful bow. Jon wore a black and crimson outfit, a nod to the Lannisters, but also a reminder of his own dragon heritage. He made his way to Joy's room, eager to read her a story a bit earlier than usual since he would be at dinner with Margaery and her family for most of the evening. When he entered, he found Joy already nestled in bed. He thanked Alessia for following his request and sat down beside her. He had intended to tell her a tale of dragons, but instead, he spun a much happier version of Arya's story, where the princess finally got her wish to return to the home she cherished. As he left the room, he pondered the fate they had imposed on Joy, keeping her hidden away when all she truly desired was freedom. Next, he headed to Sansa's room and found her already dressed. The two wolf pups watched her as she sang a little tune while checking her hair. "Really singing? Can't you see what you're doing to the wolves, little sister?" Jon teased as she stood up and playfully tapped him on the chest. "Fawn loves my singing, don't you, girl?" she replied, leaning down to stroke her wolf's back. "Did you get the extra food and water?" he asked, and she nodded, pointing to the corner where the wolves' meals were neatly lined up. Jon knelt to look at the black pup, telling him he would be back soon and that Ghost would return. The black wolf gazed at him, and Jon gently rubbed his hand over its neck as it leaned into him. "Well, shall we, little sister? You look very pretty, by the way," he said softly, taking her arm. "I do, don't I?" she giggled. "Well then, my handsome brother, you may escort me to dinner," she declared, and he rolled his eyes, making her laugh as they left the room. On their way, they encountered Loras, and Jon couldn't help but chuckle. No matter how well he dressed, Loras always managed to outshine him, his friend's taste more refined than his own. "Jon, Sansa, you look absolutely beautiful tonight," Loras complimented, and Jon noticed his sister blush. "We do, don't we?" he chimed in, and Loras simply bowed his head in acknowledgement. Loras chuckled. "Come on, let's not keep my family waiting too long. My grandmother won't be pleased." With that, they took the lift to the guest wing. Loras led them straight into the small dining room the Tyrells used. Lord Mace and Lady Allery greeted them warmly, and Jon noticed Lady Olenna smirking at his outfit. Margaery stood out in a dress of her house colors, adorned with a red and black ribbon in her hair. He found it hard to tear his gaze away from both her and the ribbon throughout the night. Garland and Lady Leonette, while polite and friendly, seemed far more interested in each other than in their guests, and Jon couldn't blame them for that. Around the table, Margaery's cousins, Eleanor and Mega, were familiar faces, but there were others he didn't know, though they all seemed friendly enough. He was grateful the meal wasn't overly extravagant. He had heard that Lord Mace enjoyed elaborate dishes to showcase his wealth. While he had no issue with such displays, he preferred simpler fare. "Is your shoulder feeling better, Jon?" Lady Allery asked. "It is, my lady. I still can't spar, though, which is frustrating," he replied, glancing at Garland. "That's a shame, Jon. I was looking forward to a rematch," Garland said. "As was I, my lord. Perhaps another time?" Jon offered, and Garland nodded in agreement. "Are you looking forward to visiting the Reach, Lady Sansa?" Leonette inquired. "Very much so, my lady. Seeing Highgarden is something I've hoped for a long time," Sansa said, her voice a bit nervous. Jon smiled at her, noticing how her demeanor brightened when she saw his encouraging expression. "Sansa and I are going to have so much fun together, aren't we, Sansa?" Margaery said, and he watched as Sansa's smile nearly lit up her face as she nodded enthusiastically. "Those ships of yours, Jon, are incredible. I never thought such a thing possible until we sailed on them." "I've never had such a comfortable journey at sea," Mace said, smiling at him. "I just designed them, my lord." It was Lord Tyrion mentioned Lord Kevin, who oversaw their construction, but it was Olenna who decided to speak up. Indeed, though without the design, they wouldn't have had the idea. "I wonder what great idea you'll come up with next, Jon," she said, directing her gaze at him. "Ice," Loras interjected, drawing everyone's attention. "Ice?" Margaery asked, raising an eyebrow. Ice. "Tell them, Jon," Loras encouraged, a playful grin on his face. If he had been closer, he might have kicked Jon under the table. "Jon?" Margaery prompted again. Ice can be used in drinks to keep them cool, or it can help preserve food for longer, allowing it to travel farther, Jon explained. "Wouldn't it just melt?" Lord Mace asked, looking skeptical. "No, my lord. There are ways to keep it cool, methods to transport and store it. We hope to begin the first stages of it in the next few moons," Jon replied, feeling a rush of confidence from Margaery's encouraging smile. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. Sansa seemed to be making new friends with Eleanor and Mega, who regaled her with tales of the balls held at Highgarden and the recent joust won by Ser Baelor, reputed to be the handsomest knight in the realm. Loras shared that he had been trying out new training regimes, which led to some playful teasing about his loss to Brienne. Garland, however, praised him for his performance in the tournament. Jon made an effort not to appear too obvious in his conversations with Margaery. He was polite and spoke to everyone, but he knew he had engaged with her twice as much as the others combined. When dinner concluded, he was surprised to find himself, Loras, and Sansa left alone with Margaery and her cousins. Garland had asked Jon where he should take Leonette before they departed the following day, and Jon suggested the second tower, explaining how to get there. As he spoke, he noticed Margaery watching him intently. Meanwhile, Sansa and Loras were deep in conversation with the others. Eleanor, Mega, and the other girls, who he learned were named Alla and Leona, gathered around him. "Did you have fun tonight, just Margaery?" he asked, and she smiled back at him. "I did, just Jon." "Oh, it looks like we're about to have a song," she said, turning as Alla re-entered the room, carrying a small wood harp. They settled into their chairs, and the girl, who looked no older than Sansa, began to play a lovely tune. Soon, she started to sing. Alysanne had a beautiful voice and sang the song remarkably well. Jon glanced over at Sansa, who was wiping her eyes and clapping her hands when the performance came to an end. He joined in the applause, watching as Alla blushed at the praise she received. "Jon, will you sing next?" "Please, Jon," Sansa asked, looking at him eagerly. "Yes, just Jon, I believe you owe me a song too," Margaery chimed in with her lopsided grin, letting him know she wouldn't let this go easily. "Jon sings?" Eleanor inquired, her curiosity piqued. "Do you play too?" Alla asked, and in that moment, Jon realized he wasn't going to escape this. He nodded and took the harp in his hands, pondering which song to play. Should he go for one of the well-known tunes or select something he discovered among his father's letters? Ultimately, he chose the latter and began to play softly. "You'll remember me when the west wind moves upon the fields of barley. You'll forget the sun in his jealous sky as we walk in fields of gold." So she took her love for to gaze awhile upon the fields of barley. In his arms, she fell as her hair came down among the fields of gold. "Will you stay with me? Will you be my love among the fields of barley? We'll forget the sun in his jealous sky as we lie in fields of gold. See the west wind move like a lover so upon the fields of barley. Feel her body rise when you kiss her mouth among the fields of gold. I never made promises lightly, and there have been some that I've broken. But I swear in the days still left, we'll walk in fields of gold. We'll walk in fields of gold. Many years have passed since those summer days among the fields of barley. See the children run as the sun goes down among the fields of gold. You'll remember me when the west wind moves upon the fields of barley. You can tell the sun in his jealous sky when we walked in fields of gold. When we walked in fields of gold." As Jon finished the song, he turned to see Sansa smiling at him, while Eleanor and Mega looked at him with curiosity. Alla, on the other hand, wore a huge grin. Loras simply nodded in acknowledgement, but when Jon glanced at Margaery, he noticed her wiping away a small tear before she beamed at him. "That was wonderful, Jon. Did you write that?" "I've never heard it before," Alla exclaimed. Jon replied, "It's an old psalm I came across among my father's things." After saying goodbye to the girls and promising Alla that they would sing together when he visited Highgarden, Jon, Loras, Sansa, and Margaery made their way to the lift. Just before they reached it, Margaery leaned in and whispered for Jon to speak with her for a moment. He glanced at Loras, who had moved ahead. "That song was beautiful, Jon. Where did you learn it?" she asked. "I found it among my father's things." "I think he wrote it for my mother," he replied, watching as a smile spread across her face. "Thank you for singing it for me," she said, a faint blush creeping onto her cheeks. "I promised you, didn't I, just Margaery," he said, returning her smile. "You did, just Jon," she responded, and together they turned to rejoin the others. Tyrion sifted through Rhaegar's letters, feeling as though he was both invading someone's privacy and catching a glimpse into a remarkable mind. The letters covered a range of topics: plans for the future, psalms, musings on family, and declarations of love for Lyanna Stark. Some letters contain information Jon needed to know right away, providing insights into his parents' feelings for each other and their dreams for the future. What surprised Tyrion most, however, was that some of the letters sent to Maester Aemon made little sense. Why would Rhaegar send Aemon a love letter meant for Jon's mother or a psalm he had written about her? As he continued reading, he began to realize that Rhaegar might have been sending these letters to. The mention of Aemon sent a chill down Jon's spine. He refused to dwell on that thought alone and instead focused on the other topics the letters addressed. When he reached the sections discussing the maesters, he was stunned. Walesa's journal revealed the man's own thoughts and feelings. Rhaegar's letters, however, provided a clearer insight into the reality that the Maesters were plotting against them, and as king, Rhaegar intended to take action. As Tyrion read a particular passage about Pycelle, he grabbed one of the letters concerning Jon's mother. "Oh, by the gods," he exclaimed, dropping both letters onto the table. He turned and nearly stumbled when he saw the black cat staring at him. Ever since the dragon had been born and the wolves had arrived, Balerion hadn't bothered him. He had hardly bothered anyone, to be precise, aside from the incident with Oberyn. Seeing the cat there, Tyrion wondered what had brought him back. To his surprise, Balerion walked over and licked his hand before swiftly darting away, almost disappearing from sight. Unnerved, Tyrion decided to take a walk to clear his mind from both what he had read and the encounter with the demon cat. He strolled down to the kitchen and grabbed some cold meat and cheese. He wasn't particularly hungry, but he felt he needed to eat something. Afterward, he made his way to the library and took a seat. Just sitting there made him feel significantly better. He lost track of time before he finally returned to his rooms, but he felt rejuvenated and began to read again. When he finished, the light outside indicated that it was late, and he realized he needed to tell Jaime and Jenna, perhaps even Lady Olenna. Most importantly, Jon needed to know, and Tyrion worried about how the boy would react. He climbed into bed, expecting that sleep would be hard to come by, but surprisingly managed to rest for a few hours. Upon waking, he washed, dressed, and headed to break his fast, only to find that it was nearly time for lunch. He ate alone, and he was grateful for it. Jon and Loras were with Brienne, getting lessons from Arthur, though Jon would just be watching and not participating. Sansa was with Joy and Margaery at their lessons. The Tyrell girl had asked to join, even though she was more advanced than his cousin or Jon's sister. He smiled when Sarah shared this with him without being prompted. The young girl loved to gossip, but only with him. As for Jaime, he and Daisy were otherwise engaged, and he couldn't help but smirk at that. His brother's afternoon trysts had become quite well known in the Rock. "There you are, nephew," he heard the dulcet tones of his aunt as she approached him. "Were you looking for me?" "I was." "Where have you been?" "I know Jon gave you that journal, but you're the Castellan here, aren't you?" "With your brother off doing whatever it is he does," she said, shaking her head, though a smirk played on her lips. "We need someone to be Lord of Casterly Rock." "I'm sorry, Aunt." "The journal, we need to talk about it." "All of us," he replied, and she looked at him, the rebuke she had been about to deliver slipping away for the moment. "What did you find? Is it bad?" she asked, noticing the worried expression on his face. "It's not good, Aunt. Jon may take it quite badly," he said softly. "Perhaps we shouldn't tell him?" she suggested, and he could sense her own concern for the boy. "No, he needs to know. I'll send for him and for Jaime. We'll meet once you're done here. Why don't you go get Jaime yourself, Aunt?" he teased. "The last thing I need is to hear the noises coming from that room." "I may send Emmon instead, but that might be enough to end him," she replied, and they both laughed. An hour later, he sat in Jaime's solar, trying not to smirk at Jaime's flushed face and Daisy's almost annoyed expression. Jenna arrived a few minutes later, and they waited for Jon. "Are you not going to tell us what this is about?" Daisy asked, her tone tinged with annoyance. "I will, Daisy, when Jon gets here. Trust me, I wouldn't have disturbed you if it weren't important," he said, watching her side before nodding. A few minutes later, Jon arrived, a small grin on his face as he entered. "I think Brienne's in love with Arthur," he joked. "Jon?" Daisy asked, confused. He pointed out a couple of things about her stance and showed her where she was going wrong with her swing. "Now she listens to everything he says as if it's the word of the gods themselves," he explained, causing Daisy to laugh. "Jon, I asked you here because of what I found in the journal and in your father's letters. What you mentioned about your uncle and the Maesters seems to be backed up here, both in Walesa's journal and your father's letters." "The Maesters? What did they do, Tyrion? Jon asked, anger rising in his voice. Tyrion shared what he knew about Whaleys and how eager he seemed for the North and South to be joined, revealing his true feelings about the Starks. Sensing Jon's growing frustration, he chose to omit what Whaleys had written about Jon's mother. He knew that would only upset him further. When he reached the part about Jon's grandmother, he could see the fury building within Jon. Are you saying he killed my grandmother? That the Maesters killed my grandmother? Jon asked, his voice surprisingly calm. I'm saying he didn't do anything to save her, Jon, not that he actually killed her. It's the same damn thing, Tyrion. Letting her die is the same as if he killed her himself, as if they killed her themselves, Jon retorted, his voice rising. Jon, Jenna said softly, and he took a deep breath, nodding to her. I'm sorry, my lord. What else? He asked, his tone calm again a moment later. With Whaleys, nothing. But Jon, I think Pycelle may have gone further. Your father's letters suggest that he believed, that he thought Pycelle may have been responsible for there only being 3 Targaryen children born to your grandmother. Tyrion began, and Daisy and Jenna gasped. I don't understand, Jon said, glancing first at Jaime and then at Jenna and Daisy. Your grandmother had a number of miscarriages, Jon, more than most women, Jaime explained. Are you saying that Pycelle did something to stop her from having children? Jon asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Rhaella had difficulties carrying a child. It caused a lot of problems with Aerys. There were also some babies who died shortly after being born, Daeron, Aegon, and Jaehaerys, Jaime continued, noticing Jon's intense gaze. You think he did something to the babies? Jon asked softly. I think it's possible, Jon, but I can't say for sure. Sometimes babies just don't make it. It doesn't always mean someone did something wrong, Tyrion said, trying to offer some comfort. 3 babies. How many others weren't born, Jaime? Jon pressed. I believe Rhaella was with child 7 or 8 times, Jaime replied. That's far too many, Jenna said, moving closer to place an arm around Jon's shoulder. What else, Tyrion? Tyrion? Jon said, his expression leaving no room for hesitation. I think your father grew to distrust them so much that he refused to have one near your mother. With Elia, he brought her to Dragonstone for the births of both your brother and sister, so he trusted that maester. But with your mother. Enough, Tyrion, enough, Jenna interjected loudly, feeling Jon slump against her. We'll talk about this later. Jon, come with me, she said softly, guiding him out of the room. I felt he needed to know, Tyrion said after they had left, his voice heavy with regret. You were right. He did need to know. Jon's resilient, Tyrion. It's better he learns this now than in pieces later. What else did you find? There's more, isn't there? Jaime asked, and Tyrion nodded. Rhaegar knew of the plots against him. Jon Arryn, Hoster Tully. Both were involved, but I think Jon Arryn was the mastermind. Father was almost part of it too, but you ruined that, Jaime said. I ruined it? How? Jon asked, confusion spreading across his face. Lisa Tully. If you had married her, it would have been all of us against them. As it stands, it didn't matter since father sat out the rebellion. Wait, let me get this straight. You're saying the Maesters, Jon Arryn, Hoster Tully, they were all in on it together, all against the Targaryens? Daisy questioned, disbelief evident in her voice. Yes and no. The Maesters wanted to be rid of the Targaryens, but not for the same reasons Jon Arryn and Hoster did. They were working toward the same goals, but their motivations were different, Tyrion explained. So, they worked together? Jaime asked. I don't know. I don't think so. If they did, it was unknowingly. 2 separate groups, both aiming for the same thing. And what was that? Daisy pressed. The Fall of Dragons, Jenna replied. As she walked with Jon to his room, she could see the turmoil in him, caught between the urge to scream or to break down in tears. No matter what he chose, she would be there for him. They reached the door just as Walder approached, the black wolf pup racing ahead. Jenna noticed the worried expression on Walder's face, but Jon merely nodded at him, prompting Walder to relax. Jon freed himself from her arm and stepped in front of her. As the black wolf noticed him, it slowed its pace, and she marveled at how quickly it complied. She watched as Jon rubbed his hand along the wolf's back, then knelt down to hug it before standing up and opening his door. He looked at her and smiled, and she took that as an invitation to enter. Inside, she was greeted by the chirping of the dragon. Jon reached over to scoop it into his arms and sat down on the bed. The black pup curled up next to him before laying down in front of him. He gestured for her to sit beside him, and she did. "Ray," he began, "please don't react to what you hear. We'll talk about it later, I promise," Jon said, as the dragon chirped back before flying to the table to watch them both. "Jon?" Jenna asked, waiting for him to continue. "We need to ensure all the maesters are thoroughly checked. We have to be certain about them. I think I have a way to find out about Crelin, but we need to be cautious. They're too important to how we operate, and we need to make them less significant until we know we can trust them. Jon. Once we identify who they are, we can deal with them. I don't know if we can afford to wait until I'm king. I think we need to confront this before then. I need to speak to Richard. We should get someone into the Citadel, find someone there we can trust. Jon. Pycelle is definitely one of them. I believe Lewin is on our side, he's different. There's also that maester at Dragonstone, the one who delivered Ray an egg. We should try to contact him. He may be able to help. Jon, she said again, and he looked at her before breaking down in tears. She wrapped her arms around him. Why, Jenna? Why would they do this? Was my grandmother so terrible, just because she wanted her sons and daughters to be raised in the north? My other grandmother, her children, my uncles, my aunts, my family, why do they hate us so? He sobbed. They are small, petty men, Jon, and we will make sure they pay. I swear it, we will, she assured him, holding him close as the dragon watched. Suddenly, the dragon began to chirp loudly. Jon stepped away from her and approached the dragon. Fire and blood, he declared resolutely to Rhaenix, who chirped back in a tone that Jenna found almost identical. He turned back to her, wrapping his arms around her tightly. Jenna found herself brushing his hair softly with her fingers, just as she had done with Walder or Tyrion when they were upset. Thank you, he said softly. For what? She asked. For not leaving me alone with this. Your family, Jon. You'll never be alone. Alone again, she said, and he smiled. She stayed with him for a few more minutes until there was a knock at the door. She got up to open it and saw Lady Margaery standing there. Inviting the girl inside, she glanced at Jon, who nodded in acknowledgement, then turned to walk back to Jaime's solar, stopping first to speak with Walder. Don't let him leave alone, she instructed Walder. I won't, my lady, he replied. Where is Jors? He's training with Arthur. I'll send someone for them both. I want you all around him tonight, understand? Aye, my lady. She nodded and walked down to Jaime's solar, entering to find Tyrion still talking to Jaime and Daisy. How is he? Tyrion asked. Better for now. But we need to stop telling him things like that, it's too much, Tyrion. Jaime, he's still a boy. We can't hit him with revelations like this, she said, looking at both her nephews. He needed to know, Aunt, Jaime defended his brother. Aye, he did. But maybe we need to know first. We should discuss how we're going to tell him these things. Right now, he's down there thinking the world hates him, hates who he is and what he is. They hate him so much that they conspired to kill off his family. Do you have any idea how that feels? She looked at them both, while Daisy nodded in agreement. No, Tyrion admitted. Exactly. So from now on, we discuss it first. I'm not against him knowing just how it's done. Now, tell me the rest of it. What she heard made her furious. Jon was right, they needed to get to the bottom of this and soon. This couldn't be allowed to continue, it was far too dangerous. Should anyone find out about Jon, they wouldn't even see it coming. When are Jerian and Oberyn back? She asked. Oberyn will be back in a day or two. Jerian is staying on in Castamere. Why? Jaime responded. They need to be told about this, Olenna too, but I'll handle that. We need to plan this out, all of us, and Jon, especially. He needs to be the one to decide, she said, and Jaime and Tyrion nodded in agreement. What about Crelin? Jaime asked. Jon mentioned he might be able to find out about him. Until then, we send nothing through him. If any of us are unwell, we get second and third opinions, she replied, and they agreed. She turned to head out to speak to Olenna. No one understood retribution quite like her, and right now, she felt a strong urge to rant about what would be done to those grey rats. Oberyn was on his way back to Lannisport, and the experience felt vastly different from his earlier journey. He had been excited, eager, even desperate to finally confront the Mountain and avenge Elia. But since that fateful moment when he had killed him, Oberyn had fallen into a quieter, more contemplative mood. He realized he had almost lost everything in an instant. As he looked at his daughters, his heart ached with the thought that he could have left them without a father, leaving Elaria and their girls alone. But the thoughts that haunted him were far worse. He would have left them at the mercy of the Mountain. He knew what had saved him. He had seen it in the Mountain's eyes when he raised the sword, and he had caught a glimpse of it in the White Wolf's gaze as it looked at him. How the boy had done it, he couldn't fathom. That he was a ward was surprising enough, but being able to ward a man? He had never heard of such a thing, even during his time at the Citadel. He glanced at the White Wolf, which was watching them silently. A dire wolf alone was an incredible sight, but there was something about Ghost that marked him as different from the others. Father, Tyene said, approaching him with a plate of cooked meat. Thank you, daughter, he said, taking the plate. Aren't you celebrating, father? She asked. I find I have no appetite for it, Tyene. Go get your sisters and Demon. We must talk, send the guards away, he instructed, and she jumped up to fetch her sisters. He looked to the wolf, which seemed to understand. He watched as Ghost moved to stand halfway between him and their guards, almost creating a barrier. A barrier of some sort. Tyene returned shortly with her sisters and Demon. Oberyn was relieved to see their smiles. Ever since the Mountain's defeat, joy had become their constant companion. Once they settled down, he took a bite of the meat and a sip of the wine Jerian had given them before they left Castamere. The Lannister lion had been pleased to see them return safe and sound. There are things I need to tell you, he began, his tone serious. These may seem strange, but I need you to listen and understand. His daughters nodded attentively. Demon? As you wish, my prince, Demon replied. Oberyn then recounted the tale of Jon and Rhaenys, how he realized she was his niece, and how Elia had named the boy her son. He spoke of the White Wolf and why Jon had been sent with him, detailing how Jon had saved his life after he slipped. He could see the confusion and disbelief etched on their faces inside, bracing himself for their questions. Father, these things you say, they can't be true. A dragon? I don't doubt you've seen one, but how could it be Rhaenys? How could you know it's not some trick? NYM asked, her brow furrowed. I stood in the room while she and Jon spoke. She told him something about a time I spent on Dragonstone, a tale I've shared with no one. He knew of it, recounted it as if he had been there, as if she had been there. Is it sorcery? Some form of black magic, perhaps? Obara interjected. I've traveled this world, daughter. I've been to Karth and seen the sorcerers at work. I've encountered red priests and shadowbinders. No, this was magic, all right, but of a different kind, one those others could only dream of possessing. He looked at Obara, who considered his words and then nodded. Then this boy, this Jon Snow, he is a prince? Tyrion asked. He is a king and he is your cousin. My sister named him her son. My niece calls him brother, and so he is my nephew, blood of my blood. My prince, forgive me, but Dorne will not accept this northern king, Demon said. The boy is from Dorne, Demon. He was born in the Tower of Joy in the Prince's Pass. He is the one responsible for the head and body we carry in that cart, the one who sent Lorch's body back to Dorne. Lorch is dead? Obara asked. He is. Jon killed him himself, one stab for every wound he inflicted on Rhaenys. A brother's justice, Oberyn said, smiling. Then he is my blood too, Obara declared. As he is mine, Tyrion and Nym added in unison. Oberyn looked to Demon. I swore an oath to follow you, my prince. If you say he is your blood, my sword is his, just as it has always been yours. He smiled at them and finished his meal. As laughter and joking resumed, he called his guards back, and they joined in the celebration of the mountain's fall. That night, as he slept, the white wolf stood guard. He awoke to the feeling of the wolf's tongue licking his face. They broke their fast and rode on, and 2 days later, Casterly Rock came into view in the distance. He glanced at the white wolf, nodded, and watched as it took off toward the rock. Part of him was tempted to follow, but ultimately, they rode past it and continued on to Lannisport, arriving just as night fell. As they passed through the city, the cart behind them carried the bones of the mountain. For the first time in years, he found he didn't care about the man. His thoughts were filled with Ellaria, her smile, her face, her body, her scent. When he reached their house, he saw her and jumped from his horse. My love, you came back to me, she said, smiling as he kissed her. Always, he replied, kissing her again. Father, it's true. He is dead. Jon said he was, Sarella said, hugging him before walking to the cart. Jon was here, he asked Ellaria. He came to tell me you were safe, that you and the girls were on your way. Back to me, Ellaria said, and he nodded. He watched as she greeted his daughters with the same warmth she had shown him. Even Demon wasn't spared a hug from his beloved. Later that night, he lay in the bath, the warm water soothing his weary bones. He looked up to see Ellaria carrying a plate of fruit, which she placed beside him on the edge of the tub. With a playful smirk, she began to disrobe. His gaze was drawn to her body, as it always was. Over the years, he had been with many maidens and beauties from Lys to Dorne and beyond, yet none were as captivating as the woman before him. As she stepped into the bath, he watched the water envelop her, obscuring her figure, and he felt a pang of frustration at its boldness. She moved closer, her legs brushing over his, radiating warmth and desire. My love, she whispered, biting his ear, and then she revealed to him a taste of heaven. The next morning, they broke their fast alone. Ellaria shared Jon's suggestion with him, and he welcomed it, knowing it would delight Sarella. He summoned his daughter and revealed the truth. Her reaction was notably different from his other girls. She, like him, had a deeper understanding of such matters. A dragon? A real dragon, she exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement. Not just any dragon, Sarella. She is your cousin, just like Jon, he explained, and she nodded, absorbing the news. So what say you, daughter? Is this something that would please you? Ellaria asked. Yes, very much. Can I stay? Father, can I stay? Sarella asked, looking to him with hope. You can. Now come, we must dress. I think we should visit your cousins, he said, watching her dash off to prepare eagerly. I think you just made her dreams come true, Ilaria remarked. It wasn't me, my love, he replied, kissing her neck. They dressed and got ready, setting off within the hour. They rode slowly, sharing the carriage, enjoying the peace and the beautiful scenery. It was almost noon when they arrived, greeted by Jon and the Tyrell boy, with both their sisters standing nearby alongside a large blonde girl and Lady Dacey. He noticed their attire and was pleasantly surprised to see Dacey dressed in leather armor, which only enhanced her beauty. Prince Oberyn, Lady Ilaria, what a delightful surprise, Dacey said, extending her hand for him to kiss. My lady, it is wonderful to see you, he replied, and Ilaria exchanged pleasantries with her as he moved toward Jon. My prince, it's good to see you well, Jon said, a smile spreading across his face as he noticed the white wolf with 2 pups in the background. Likewise, Jon. Perhaps we could speak? Oberyn suggested, and Jon nodded in agreement. He turned to see his daughters chatting with Lady Dacey and the large blonde girl, their faces lit up with excitement. Before he could find out what had them so animated, Sarella approached him. May I join you when you speak? She asked, looking hopeful. He glanced at Jon, who nodded. Of course, my lady. We'd be honored, Jon replied. My love, it seems we've interrupted some sparring that the girls want to join in on. Perhaps you can delay your conversation for now? Ilaria suggested. I think that's an excellent idea. What do you think, Jon? Oberyn asked. As you wish, my prince, Jon said. Oberyn watched as Jon walked over to speak with a tall guard, who nodded and then walked away, replaced by an even larger one who approached Jon. This was the giant he had seen before, and up close, he was even more impressive, the large double axe resting on his shoulders a formidable warning to anyone who might wish harm upon his nephew. They took the lift to the main floors and were led to a courtyard where weapons and armor were displayed. He observed as the blonde girl led his daughters over to the racks, while the Tyrell boys showcased some additional options. Moments later, Lord Jaime arrived with his brother, and Oberyn nodded to them before stepping aside to stand with the dwarf. It's good to see you, my prince, Tyrion said. You too, Lord Tyrion, Oberyn replied, smiling. Lord Jaime, he said, nodding to the taller man. It seems your daughters wish to spar, my prince. My lady wife appears most eager to accommodate. Jaime smirked. I look forward to seeing it. Just then, a servant arrived with wine. Jaime glanced over to see Lady Jenna and the young blonde girl, Joy, arriving, with Balerion following closely behind as she rushed to Jon and Lady Margaery. 2 young blonde boys appeared a moment later. By the time the sparring was about to begin, even the Queen of Thorns, along with Lady Dacey's cousin, her wife, and their baby had arrived. He watched in surprise as the woman chatted happily with Ilaria, while Sarella engaged with Jon, his sister, and Lady Margaery. Turning his attention back to his daughters, he saw them preparing themselves. Dacey grabbed a blunted mace, and he grimaced. His daughters might learn a painful lesson today. Jaime was right about one thing, Jon was resilient. After dealing with the revelations Tyrion had dropped on him, he bounced back far quicker than she could have imagined. She had seen him laughing with Margaery and Sansa, playing with Joy, and now sparring with Loras and Brienne. Though he was absolutely terrible at it, his left hand simply couldn't keep up with his right. If it weren't for his quickness and the reluctance of either opponent to strike his injured shoulder, Jon would have been defeated in moments. As it was, it took only slightly longer. The one time he managed to win was surprisingly with a spear, something Arthur had suggested. But he paid for it in the next fight. Had Brienne seen the looks Margaery and Sansa exchanged when she caught Jon's hand, she would have ended up spending even more time in her room than she already did. Well done, Jon said with a smile as he bowed out, letting Loras spar with Brienne while he chatted briefly with Arthur before being fussed over by his sister and Margaery. As Brienne and Loras exchanged victories, Loras ultimately edged her out in the end. During those moments, the girls seemed genuinely happy. Still settling in, she had spent most of her first few days with her father or Jaime, until she decided to take Brienne aside for a chat. "Lady Dacey, I'm sorry. I thought no one was here," Brienne said as she sat in the library. "Please, it's Dacey," the girl replied with a smile. "Brienne," the girl said shyly in return. "Are you not enjoying yourself here, Brienne?" "No, my lady, it's not that. It's just, I'm not used to so many people. I thought it would be just Jon, Loras, and me, but with Lady Margaery and Lady Sansa, I..." She paused, realizing what was really holding her back. She had been avoiding Jon and Loras. While Jon was busy dealing with his own issues, Loras, though supportive of his friend, had also been trying to include Brienne more. But it was the girls who made her uneasy. She felt strange around them, as if they would judge her harshly or mock her. Dacey sighed at the absurdity of those southern customs. Sansa and Margaery would never judge her as she feared, but she had no way of knowing that for sure. So, she chose to hide rather than risk being hurt. "You know, where I come from, women are taught to fight alongside the men. From an early age, I learned how to use a sword, an axe, or wield a mace," Brienne said, smiling as the girl looked at her with interest. "I had heard that the ladies of Bear Island are as fierce as the bears on their sigil," Dacey said, smiling back. "Jon?" Brienne asked. You should spend more time with them, you know. With Jon and Loras, with Sansa and Margaery. They're not how you think they are," Dacey said, looking her in the eye. I know how strange it can feel, how hard it is to come to a new place. But I assure you, Brienne, if you spend time with them, you'll enjoy it." "Spend more time here," she said, and the girl nodded as she walked away. Brienne had gone to Arthur, asking him to begin training the girl, and she was pleased to see the difference. Although she was still getting used to being around Sansa and Margaery and did so only sparingly, she was making progress. They had been sparring today when word arrived of Prince Oberyn's arrival. Part of her was annoyed, as it meant she would have to delay her own sparring for another day. However, upon greeting them, she found they were quite different from the other lords and ladies she had entertained since arriving. Illyrio was witty and seemed non-judgmental, something she couldn't say about many of the ladies from the West. She knew some of that judgment stemmed from jealousy over her marrying Jaime. The prince was handsome and charming, and knowing he and Jon were on the same side was a great relief. His daughters, upon seeing her armor, were amazed that she fought. While they weren't completely dismissive, Brienne found their attitude somewhat grating, and before she knew it, she was challenging them. "Of course, my lady, we'd be delighted to," the young blonde, Tyrion, said sweetly, while her sisters smirked. They took the lift, and Brienne had Loras and herself show them to the armor and weapons. By the time they returned, ready to start, it seemed word had spread. Jaime, Tyrion, Jenna, the children, and half the Rock had come out to watch. Brienne took her blunted mace and looked to see who she would face. The oldest, Obara, stood before her with a spear. "When you're ready, my lady," Obara said arrogantly. Dacey moved quickly, noticing the shocked look on the girl's face as she dodged Brienne's mace. Obara struck out, missing with her spear, but the next blow caught the small round shield the girl held, rattling her arm. Obara's thrusts grew quicker and more desperate, and Dacey smirked as she moved in for the kill. When Obara delivered her next blow, Dacey allowed the spear to barely miss, catching Brienne off guard. Brienne positioned the shaft between her arm and side, pulling the girl close. With a swift tap of her mace, she freed the shield and swept the girl's legs out from under her. Obara fell to the ground, disarmed, with the spear still lodged between Dacey's arm and side as the shield rolled away. Dacey dropped the spear and placed the mace by the girl's forehead, watching as she nodded. "Yield?" Dacey asked. I yield, Obara replied. Daisy helped the girl to her feet and then glanced at the other two, who exchanged looks and nodded. Both stood ready to face her. Tyrion wielded a sword and shield, while Nymeria brandished 2 daggers. However, their stances needed improvement. Where Obara had been crisp and tight, Tyrion and Nymeria's forms were more relaxed, which would cost them in a fight like this. Again, Daisy moved quickly. The girls attempted to flank her, with Tyrion striking first. Daisy caught the sword with force, watching it clatter to the ground, the girl unprepared for her strength. As Nymeria swung hard and low, Daisy forced the girl to retreat while she seized Tyrion's shield, pushing her back. Turning to a stunned Nymeria, Daisy waited for the girl to make her move. She demonstrated why daggers were a poor choice for this kind of fight. Getting close was a challenge when a mace stood in the way. Daisy smirked at the girl's growing frustration. A moment later, she blocked a thrown knife with her mace, sending it tumbling to the ground. Nymeria quickly tried to capitalize on what she thought was a distraction, but as she lunged with her knife, Daisy trapped Nymeria's arm by her side, just as she had with the spear shaft. Yield, Daisy said, the mace poised near the girl's head. I yield, Nymeria admitted. Daisy looked up to see Jaime smiling broadly, and she received a nod of approval from Prince Oberyn, which she returned. Jon and the others were clapping as they watched, while Brienne looked on, her mouth agape. Daisy moved toward her next challenge. As Daisy walked back, the Dornish knight stepped forward, gripping a blunted sword. She raised an eyebrow, and he nodded in acknowledgement. Perhaps, my lady, you do me the honor, Ser Demon said. You really think it an honor to be beaten by a lady? She replied, eliciting laughter from the onlookers. By a lady such as yourself, it would be no shame, he said, his smile genuine. This was a different kind of fight. Demon possessed strength where Obara had faltered, and his technique surpassed that of both Tyrion and Nymeria. His stance was impeccable. The way he held his sword revealed a man who had spent countless hours training and perfecting his craft. Yet, he had chosen to forego a shield, which she found unwise. The clash of her mace against his sword echoed throughout the courtyard. He moved quickly, his strikes sharp and precise. However, Daisy had fought against her husband, and compared to him, Demon seemed slow. She easily blocked his attacks, pouring more power into her own strikes. She felt the vibrations as her mace struck his sword and noticed the small grimaces he made in response. With a determined swing, she aimed hard at him. As he raised his sword to defend himself, she spun and landed a blow on his other arm. The impact wasn't full force, but it was enough. As he winced, she seized the opportunity and knocked his sword from his grip. The force of her attack caught him off guard, and the blade clattered to the ground. Without needing to ask, he bowed his head. I yield, my lady. The day is yours. Daisy smiled at the cheers from the spectators and placed her mace back on the rack. As she began to walk inside, she spotted Jon with Prince Oberyn and one of his daughters. Brienne was engaged in conversation with the others. Jenna had taken Margaery, Joy, and Sansa inside, while Yora and Lyness accompanied Ilaria, who was playfully interacting with Gerald. Turning around, she saw Jaime approaching, a broad smile on his face and a mischievous glint in his eyes. You are amazing, my love, he said, leaning in to kiss her. Aren't I always? She quipped. You are. Now, I think I should take. You should come back to our rooms and soothe your weary bones, he said, looking at her intently. My bones are well enough, thank you very much. Besides, we have guests, she replied. Well, the guests are being entertained. If your bones don't need soothing, perhaps I can find some way to reward you for your victory, he said softly, nibbling on her ear. Fine then, I'll let you reward me, she said, and he nearly grabbed her to pull her inside, her laughter echoing through the courtyard. Ashera felt a flutter of anxiety. She had been sick twice during this journey, she couldn't tell if it was from the sea or her nerves. But as they drew closer to Lannisport, her heart raced even more. Oberyn was there with his paramour and daughters, and that alone should have given her pause. It had been so long since she'd seen Elaya's brother. But it was the thought of meeting Lyanna's son that truly troubled her. What would that encounter mean? She worried about how he would welcome Cregan. Would it be friendly? Would he harbor any ill will toward her son? Would he send them away? Arthur's letter suggested not, but still, she felt uneasy. She understood the implications of her son's true heritage and the problems it could cause. She had no desire to be involved in a struggle for the North succession. Winterfell and everything the Starks owned were never Brandon's wishes. He never desired to be Lord or Warden of the North. Had fate not twisted, Eddard would have been named over him anyway. "Mother, we can see it in the distance," Cregan exclaimed as he walked into her cabin. "Can we indeed?" "I expect you want me to come watch it with you as we dock," she replied with a smile. "I do. Please, come, Mother," he urged, turning to head back to the deck. She rose and followed him, seeing him standing there, excitement radiating from him. Lady Melisandre and her 2 guards looked almost as thrilled. Ashera nodded to the woman, who smiled back, then took Cregan's hand as Lannisport came into view. The city loomed larger than Ashera had anticipated. As she gazed out at the docks, she marveled at the magnificent ships that filled the harbor, making her own vessel seem like a mere rowing boat by comparison. Even Melisandre looked on in awe. "Mother, look at those," Cregan exclaimed, pointing excitedly. "They're incredible, aren't they, son?" Ashera replied, and he nodded in agreement. Once they docked, Melisandre and her guards collected their belongings and hired a man with a cart to take them to a nearby tavern where they could rent rooms. They planned to send one of their guards to Casterly Rock to speak with Arthur and figure out what would happen next. For now, Ashera felt relieved to be on solid ground. Although her nervousness lingered, the ability to walk without the swaying of the ship brought her some comfort. After they ate, they headed to their rooms. Cregan was disappointed to learn it would be another day or 2 before he could meet his cousins. Explaining the situation to him had been a challenge. How could she make him understand that while one cousin would know who he was, the other would not? He could tell them he was Ser Darren's nephew, but that was all. When he asked why, she had assured him that Arthur and his cousin would explain it better. Once he met them, he would understand. Thankfully, Cregan accepted her words. That night, Ashera dreamed of him again, as she had since leaving Starfall for this journey. Her wild wolf smiled at her in that familiar way. She could almost feel his lips on hers, almost reach out to touch him. But as always, the vision darkened. She saw his hands clutching his throat, reaching for her, trying to speak, and then she watched the light fade from his eyes. Awakening with tears streaming down her face, she walked to the window. As she looked out, the sun began to rise, and the sight made her close her eyes. Memories flooded back of a morning spent on a hill, cradled in her love's arms as the sun climbed the sky. She pictured the black walls in the distance, the banners fluttering, and she heard his voice, clear and resolute. "I don't care what my father says, I am yours. You are mine, now and always." "Now and always," she replied softly as she walked back to the bed. Cregan woke up an hour later, and they broke their fast early. Ashera decided to take a walk through the town, and her son was eager to see it all for himself. By mid-morning, they made their way back to the tavern, where the guard they had sent to Casterly Rock had returned. The man accompanying him was a giant, clearly from the north. He looked at her, then at Cregan, smiling at her son, who was staring at him as if he were a character from a tale. "My lady, Ser Darren is unable to join us for now. He's busy with some other matters, but he sent me to welcome you and escort you all to the rock." "I thank you, Ser." "Ser Walder, my lady." "Ser Walder Allers. I'm one of Jon's guards. You know my cousin, Cregan asked. I do, young man. Cregan, isn't it? He replied, smiling at her son. Yes, how did you know? Your uncle told me, my lady. Perhaps you'd like to take your lunch first. It'll take us some time to reach the rock in the carriage. Carriage? She asked. Lord Jaime insisted, my lady, Walder said. They ate their lunch, and Ashera laughed as Walder shared stories of his namesake, the Wolf of the North. He recounted how he had crossed blades with the Dragon Knight himself, how he had risen to be Hand of the King and ruled the North for many years. Ashera pondered the dangers of what he was saying to her son, but Cregan was far more interested in the stories of heroism than the politics of ruling. Did he really fight the Dragon Knight? Who won? Cregan asked excitedly. Aemon, Walder replied. Oh, her son said, his excitement fading. The Dragon Knight said he'd never fought a better swordsman, though, Walder added, and Cregan smiled at that. Once they finished their meal, Walder and the guards. They gathered their belongings, including Lady Melisandre's, and set off for Casterly Rock. Arthur noticed Oberyn's arrival and glanced at Jon, who nodded, allowing Walder to shadow him instead. Arthur kept to the background, contemplating when, or if, he should approach the prince. As he watched the sparring matches, he chuckled when Dacey defeated Oberyn's former squire. The man was a skilled swordsman, but you didn't face a mace without a shield unless you were wielding a great sword. Afterward, he retreated to his room while Jon and Oberyn headed to Jon's quarters. He needed some time to think. Years ago, he had called Oberyn a friend. He and Ashera had played together as children in the Water Gardens, their bond almost like that of brothers. But as time passed and they spent less time together, Arthur found new brothers, one of whom was closer than any he had ever known. His encounters with Oberyn became infrequent, and their last meeting at Harrenhal had nearly turned violent. Oberyn knew better than to threaten the prince, but the tension had been palpable. Arthur had been ready to defend himself when Oberyn spat at his feet, but in the end, he simply forced him away from the tent. When the news of the tragedy in the Red Keep reached him, he wept for his princess, for her son and daughter. Now, many years later, he knew Oberyn would somehow blame him for it. He lay on the bed when Jon knocked on the door and entered, taking a seat across from him. Arthur, it's time if you wish. Jon said. I need to do this, Jon. Do it in my room, with Rhaenix there. I don't know if we should. What if something goes wrong? Arthur replied. Ghost will be close by too. I would join you if you asked, you know that, right? I know, but no. This has to be me alone. As you say. Arthur, there are many people to blame for what happened in the Red Keep, Varys, my grandfather, Tywin, Lorch, and the Mountain. You are not one of them. No matter what Oberyn says, Jon said, and Arthur smiled at him. They walked to the door of Jon's room, with Walder accompanying them. Upon reaching the room, they found Jorah standing there. Jon nodded to him before entering and leading Arthur inside. Oberyn was sitting on the bed, playing with Rhaenix. Her cheerful chirps filled the air as he watched them. Uncle, Jon said, and Arthur felt grateful that they were at least beginning to set things right. Jon, it seems your sister is in a playful mood, Oberyn remarked, but fell silent when he noticed Arthur. I wish for you two to speak, uncle, but know that Arthur is my Kingsguard, as he has always been, Jon stated. Oberyn kept his gaze fixed on Jon, nodding in acknowledgement. Jon leaned down and took the dragon from Oberyn. As he walked to the table, he could hear her chirping softly while he spoke to her. He then smiled at both Oberyn and Arthur before heading to the door, leaving the two of them still staring silently at each other. You should be dead, Oberyn said, his voice laced with accusation. I should, but I'm not, Arthur replied calmly. Where were you? Where I was supposed to be, guarding the king. While she was being killed, you guarded the king. While Aegon was being killed, you guarded the king. While Rhaenys was being killed, You guarded the king, Oberyn spat, filled with spite and anger. I did, and I would do it again, even knowing what happened, Arthur said firmly. Oberyn jumped to his feet, fury radiating from him. You dare call yourself a Dornishman? I call myself a Kingsguard. We had 2 of us to guard the future queen and her son. Then 3 to guard the boy, 3 against how many to protect the last remaining hope for not just the crown, but for everything? She had 1, Oberyn shouted. 1 to guard all 3 of them. She had 4, Jaime, Lewin, Barristan, and Jonathan. It was Aerys, listening to Varys, who left her with 1. Not I, and not you. Rhaegar, he shouted back. So that's your excuse? That's supposed to free you from guilt? I carry guilt with me always, but not for that. I feel guilty for not doing what Jaime Lannister did, putting my blade through Aerys' back, for not killing that madman years earlier. If I had, then she'd be alive. Aegon, Rhaenys, Rhaegar, and Lyanna would all have lived, and that boy would have grown up with the family he deserved. So yes, I feel guilty, and I will until the day I die, but for that. He watched as Oberyn reached into his shirt, his face contorted with rage. Suddenly, the dragon roared, or as close to a roar as she could muster. Both men looked on as she unleashed a torrent of flame, igniting the chair. Jon rushed in moments later, with Walder and Jors by his side. The 2 men quickly threw water to douse the flames. Arthur, Oberyn, Jon said, addressing them before turning to his sister. You're both behaving like children. Arthur, you are not to blame for this. And you, uncle, if you seek vengeance, direct it toward those who truly deserve it, the maesters who plotted against my family and the men who crave their own piece of the crown. Oberyn turned to Jon, eyebrows raised. What? There are things you need to know. We'll discuss it tomorrow. For now, it's best to let cooler heads prevail. Oberyn started to leave, but Jon called out, Arthur, stay. Jors carried the charred chair from the room, and Walder shooed away the servants who had rushed in, closing the door behind them to ensure privacy. Arthur watched as Jon approached the bed, the dragon in his hands. Did you have to destroy the chair? Jon asked. The dragon chirped in response. It was a good way to prevent you 2 from killing each other, but I did like that chair. More chirps echoed from the dragon. Well, it's just as well you're not as large as Balerion, then, isn't it? Otherwise, I'd never find something I can sit in, Jon said with a laugh. After setting the dragon down, he turned to Arthur, who braced himself for a lecture. Since he had started guarding the boy, Arthur had noticed that little expressions reminiscent of Rhaegar would occasionally surface when Jon was aggravated or annoyed. When Jon smiled or appeared happy, he was all Rhaenys and Rhaegar. But for Arthur, he saw Lyanna in those moments. However, when Jon was angry or sad, he was undeniably his father's son. Unlike Rhaegar, Jon wasn't melancholic by nature, but he could brood just as deeply. How are you feeling? Jon asked, and Arthur smiled, seeing the 2 of them clearly then. I'm well. He's angry, I get that. But thanks to your sister, I think I'll live another day, he replied, glancing at the dragon. Hopefully more than that. I need you with me, Arthur. I'll speak to him again. You 2 may never be friends, but I'll try, Jon said earnestly. I thank you, my king, Arthur responded as he took his leave. The next night, the Red Priestess's guard arrived at the rock. Arthur had wanted to speak to Ashera himself, but Oberyn was still there, and Jon had insisted he stay by his side. Jon felt it was important for Oberyn to see him there. So, Jon instructed him to send Walder to bring them to the rock. As the hours passed, Arthur counted them down, and finally, they walked to the guest wing. Jon seemed just as excited as he was to see them. As Arthur entered the room, he spotted her, Lady Melisandre, her hair dyed blonde, with Cregan standing nervously beside her. Her guards were so focused on their prince that they barely acknowledged him. Jon nodded for Arthur to greet his sister first. "Ash," he said, hugging her tightly. "Arthur, your hair," she exclaimed with a chuckle. "What about yours?" He shot back playfully. "Cregan, come give your uncle a hug," Ash called, and his nephew rushed to embrace him tightly as Jon moved forward. "Lady Ashera, it's an honor to finally meet you, Aunt," Jon said, noticing Ash's eyes glisten with recognition. "You too, Your Grace," his sister replied, quickly remembering her manners. "Please, Aunt, it's Jon," he insisted, and she nodded, a smile spreading across her face. "You must be my cousin, Cregan," Jon said, turning to his nephew. "I am, Jon," Cregan replied, shaking Jon's hand with a grin. "Lady Melisandre, an honor," Jon said, shifting his attention to the Red Priestess. "My prince, it is good to finally see you in the flesh." "My men and I are at your command," she responded with a respectful nod. "I thank you, my lady," Jon replied. "I shall see you all settled. I'm sure we have much to discuss."